Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 5, I believe. I've lost count now. I think we're on episode 5. So today I'm going to talk to the lovely T about the loss that she had and her big move from the UK to England. She's got lots to talk about, the challenges that followed. It's going to be a great chat. So subscribe to this channel and like it, because it's going to help get this out to more people, and the more people I reach, the more ladies I can reach, the better. So without further ado, I just introduced T into the studio.
Hey,
Hi,
Joe.
how are you doing? Lovely to see you.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Sun's shining, so that's a plus.
It's not jinxing.
Finally.
I know. So happy. I'm a sun girl. I mean, I'm a tropical girl at all times. So, yeah, no. I don't need the heat. I just need the sun.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I sit in the shade. I don't sit in direct sun, but just seeing the sun and the brightness and everything just lifts the mood, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Those are my words. It's like it literally lifts the mood. Yeah.
It does. So without further ado, T, introduce yourself and let our listeners know who you are. And well, let's just chat. Let's chat.
Where does one even begin? Okay, so my name is T Ari. For those who don't know me, you probably don't. I'm originally Nigerian. Not originally, I'm still Nigerian. Have lived in the UK for the last 17 years now. I'm a coach, a multi-passionate coach. I help creative women over the age of 40, bring to life those ideas that they have. I'm also the host of the Dream in Action podcast. That was it, Dreams to Action. So that's in a nutshell what I do now. But like I said earlier, I'm multi-passionate. So I've done so many things, so many iterations of my life. Singer-songwriter, copywriter, a lawyer at some point in my life. That's another era entirely. But that was my training from uni. So I love life and I love to do things, and my aim in life is to die empty, so of all the things that have been
you've got such a great aura, T. I mean, I can just feel the vibes coming off you already.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. It's a deep conversation yet. So where does it all begin? Can you take us back to Nigeria, maybe?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, that was the first 28 years of my life. So I guess people can do the maths and know how old I am now. So I grew up first of 7 children in a middle class, family. My dad was a police officer, rose to a high ranking officer in Nigeria at the time. So that meant we moved around a lot. I've always been a bookworm because I like to say my mom always got me the boring gifts, which is the books. My dad gave me the cooler gifts and the cameras and all that malarkey. But things went from great to worse really quickly because my dad got retired, and anyone who knows the Nigerian society is not as straightforward. So long and short of the story, we went from upper middle class to poverty, pretty much, to the point where we couldn't even. I mean, I was, like I said, first of 7 children, so it was easier to.
Why is that? Sorry to interrupt there.
No
why
worries.
is that? Because there's no help from the government, or?
Yeah, no help from the government. That's not the society Nigeria is. Nigeria is a beautiful country, but from a societal standpoint, from an economic standpoint, there's such a wide gap between the rich and the poor, unfortunately. And we don't have a benefit system like we have here in the UK. So you can't lean on anything or anybody. We pretty much just lean on each other, So when you don't have anyone meeting you at that need, and it was such an interesting story because my dad was probably one of the most generous people, but at his time of need, there weren't a lot of people to step up to help. So, and the relationship between my parents wasn't even that great. So that worsened things even more. It created this gap. And like I said, we went from like upper middle class. Yeah, go on.
7 kids to look after as well.
7 mouths to feed. And at some point, I mean, I was just going to say that it was so easy to feed the last 3 or the last 4, and then we that were older, we will go without, and that was seen as normal in some cases. And then around the age of 20, so this is already coming from a very dysfunctional home. I call myself a parentified child. So I was already used to being in charge of taking care of so many children. I felt like their mother at some point, which as a child myself, I really didn't have any business feeling that way. But fast forward a few years later, my mom dies of cancer at 42. So being again, my youngest sibling at the time was 6 years old, and then dad follows after 2 years, and again last sibling was 8 at the time. I was 20, just turned 20, and that just threw things to a completely different level.
Massive responsibility, not only dealing with the loss, but then the responsibility of your siblings. Oh, bless you.
Yeah, I mean, at that point in time, we had, thankfully, we had uncles who, and aunties who, came in and swamped in to help out, especially from an educational standpoint, because I was still in uni myself, so wasn't making any money. So there was really nothing I could do from that standpoint except offer emotional support. But it, by and large, meant I had to start taking care of myself, so I couldn't really look to anyone to help, at least not on a consistent basis. But so very early in life, I knew that saying that you hear people say a lot, that no one is coming to save you. I learned that really early on, because anyone who's in that sort of situation, you have a lot. And I know people mean well, so it's not, no grudges whatsoever against anybody, because everybody's going through their own issues, right?
Yeah.
So people swim in to help for a time, and then for whatever reason they have to face their own lives, right? So they move on, and occasionally they check in. I hope everything is okay. When you need anything, just say something. And I'm like, but we are living life and living this reality on a daily basis. So you can't really, you can't fault anyone for that. So you have to come to the point where you realize that you become your own champion and you become your own rescuer. I mean, in my case, thankfully, I found faith. And I think that was probably what kept me from deep, deep depression, because I had hope and I held on to that hope.
Did you not have the faith before that? That's you.
Not really, not really. I mean, Nigeria is quite a religious country. If anyone who knows Nigeria, so you have like two parts of the country, and this is a little history of Nigeria now, right? So the northern part of Nigeria is predominantly Muslim, and the southern part of the country, which is where I come from, is predominantly Christian. So it's normal to see, on air, so in the media, so they sign off with a "God bless you" type thing, but my family wasn't generally religious. I mean, there was a traditional African religion initially, and my mom was Catholic, and then my dad was Anglican at some point, but they didn't really bring us up as a family of faith. I actually found faith myself, and it's weird. I literally walked into a church, and I mean, the music, I already said I was a singer-songwriter, right? So the music drew me in. It was really beautiful, and I just found such succor in that environment, and dragging on my siblings as well, one after the other, to come with me. I mean, one of them now is a pastor, is a priest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, from that, doing that. At the time, he was like 4 or 5 years old. But yeah, so that was, I think, probably the biggest thing that kept me sane during that periods of anxiety, times when in uni where I didn't know where the next meal was going to come from, took me through food poisoning at a time when, and I literally didn't know what I was going to do. Thankfully, I had a next door neighbor who, borrowed me some money to go buy food, because, and you know why I got food poisoning? Because I was repeating a tea bag. I kept repeating, I kept using a tea bag.
And you got it from that?
Yeah. Because what I would do, this is so weird now I think about it. I was like, why did I do that? So what I would do was I would use the tea bag and make myself some tea in the morning, because that's all I had. And I didn't know where the next meal was going to come from, remember? So I would keep the tea bag on top of something to dry up, and then use it the next day. And then use it the next day.
Germs.
Yeah.
Bless you.
It was crazy. So I thought I was going to die, but, because I was tired, I was stressed out, I had no strength.
On top of study as well. I mean, how did you even study properly feeling like that?
like I said, I can't. If I had something else to call apart from faith, I would have said that. But I mean, that was probably the bedrock. Then I had a few friends who also came from the church, who, great support. But I mean, we were all struggling pretty much, right? Because we're students, we're broke. But just being able to someone buying you a meal here, and then somebody else buying you a meal there, and then just seeing how everybody's surviving, and then you just again you suck it up because you don't have there are no other options. And
Mm,
in Nigeria, you needed a degree to even get like the basic job. So
mm,
it was not even it wasn't and I didn't see myself having an option.
yeah.
So when push comes to shove, and when you are made, I tell my children, it's like sometimes it's the squeeze that brings out the sweetest juice, right? So
Mm.
being in that situation where we had to be challenged, I had to be challenged.
That's a
You dig,
great way to look at life in general, isn't it?
yeah,
You
you
know?
dig deep.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know what to say to that. That's just amazing. I love the way
No,
you say,
no,
when you squeeze, the juice comes out. I mean, that's just such a beautiful way to put it.
absolutely. I didn't see. Don't. I mean, this is all with hindsight. At the time when you're going through it,
Yeah.
you're like, "Why is this happening to me? What have I done?" Right? You try to be as forward-looking as possible because that's the only way you can survive. But going through, yeah, that was really tough. That was really tough.
And when you graduated and you got your degree, where did you go from there?
Well, after that, it was law school, which was a completely different. So
Wow.
with law school, there's kind of uni was like in a different state, different area, region of Nigeria. Then we moved to law school. This was around, so my dad was still alive, so he died like a couple of months into law school. And that again was, I like to call it like the hustle. So pretty much just hustling. I think the only thing probably I had to work on really, because when you're fixated with just surviving, you lose yourself in the process. At least that's how it was with me. I didn't. You don't even have the luxury to think of identity. So when I hear people think, oh, well, I think of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I don't know if you know of that hierarchy where it talks about basic needs and then it goes all the way up to identity and purpose. I was like, that makes perfect sense. When you're in a war situation, and that's the way it feels like
Yeah.
when you don't have the basic amenities, right? You feel like you're just surviving till the next day. You don't think about identity. You don't think about purpose. Not really, right? You are focused on where the next meal is going to come from.
Yeah.
So graduating, I literally hustled my way through, had a few jobs here and there because obviously I was had a degree, so I could get myself something. I just remember struggling with a lot of confidence because I don't know. I think it's this thing of when the biggest cheerleaders for you, which would be your parents, are not there anymore. You
Mm.
kind of feel like you always have to play. You're never top of the pile. At least that's the way it felt for me. I don't know how other people react to that, but I always felt I wasn't top of the pile. That I was always underneath. I wasn't good enough. I was never, good enough because for some
Yeah.
reason,
It's like, well, I know I've got a 20-year-old, and whenever he's feeling low or feeling like that he needs a boost, he comes to his parents. We give him
yes,
a boost, and then he feels all right again, and
yeah,
then he cracks on. So I can imagine not having that
yeah,
would just be, where'd you go in a 20-year-old?
yeah. Okay, so by this time I was 22, fresh into law school, and dad dies a few months into law school. And at that point in time, honestly, Joe, I was ready to give up because I was like,
Nice.
what's the point, right? I'm like, there's no point. Why am I doing all this? Aside the fact that I started, and anyone who knows me, I'm not the sort of person that likes to leave things hanging, especially something like that. And it's weird because I told my mom when I started uni, I was like, law is not for me. I'm not going to finish it. But I ended up finishing it anyway. So going into law school, I literally had to just put my head down and do the work. I barely passed, but I did just enough not to have to repeat law
Mm.
school. And then it was just straight on to finding a job, um, which was the next thing. I found a job, and then after
In
that,
law.
it was marriage, pretty much.
So what was your job? Was your job to do with law? What did you do?
That is a very interesting question. I didn't want to work as a lawyer, which again just tells of the sort of, I already knew I didn't want to do law.
So
But
so why did you follow that path then into law school? If
it's a
you
great question. So again, just a little insight into the Nigerian society. So the Nigerian society I grew up in, we didn't have a lot of choices in that sense, because again, it was from that standpoint of survival. So in the eyes of our parents, in order to survive in the Nigerian economy, there were only 3 or 4 courses you could go to study. It had to be medicine, so you become a lawyer. It had to be engineering, had to be law. So if you were more literature, like history, humanities inclined, then it had to be law. If you were biology, chemistry, anatomy, that's sort of inclined, it was medicine. Physics, it was engineering. Then as time went on, those who was really good at math, then they started inserting things like accountancy and then pharmacy. But it was those 3. So I didn't have a choice but to go study law. And I got in very easily as well. So everyone at the time was, because you had, let me explain, right? At the time I finished uni, we were churning out, the Nigerian society was churning out about 2 million graduates. Where were you going to put them? Like, where were we going to find work? So it just made sense. And if you studied anything else, it was either because you weren't good enough to do law, engineering, or medicine, and you most of the time ended up as a teacher, which is really sad, but that was the way the economy was. So that was why I studied law. But I knew from the word go, I didn't want to practice. I practiced for a year. I mean, I still have a picture of me with a wig and gown, and I laugh because I'm like, oh my goodness, that is so not me. But yeah.
Wow. So then you went into marriage. So where did you meet your husband?
Yeah, so I met my husband in the church, which is great. So I was a singer, he was a keyboardist, so pianist. So he would, we scouted him actually for our little church in the little town I lived in. And we were friends, started out as friends, and one thing led to the other, as it does. And 3 years later, we were thinking about marriage. I mean, he was scared because he was like, oh, I'm the last of 3 children, and she's first of 7. And everyone knows that in the Nigerian society, when you're first daughter, especially of a brood of siblings, you are their mother. Pretty much that's how the society looks at you, especially when even if the parents are there, you're still looked at like this mother of the children. So and he didn't want that responsibility, because that automatically makes him a dad, right? To children he didn't want. Well, in that sense. But yeah, I think I want to believe that I was too good to let go of. So
well, you're still together, so
oh yeah, gosh, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we made it work, got married, and got pregnant 9 months afterwards. That's the story.
So when did you come to the UK then? How did that happen?
Right. So weird story. When my mom passed, we were going through her stuff, and you know how, as you do, you pack up the things, put it away. And my mom was a journaler. I didn't realize that. I mean, now I know she liked to journal, but I didn't call it that at the time. She just used to write these little pieces scattered around the house, right? Of her thoughts and her dreams and her aspirations, sometimes her anger. I remember one letter that she never sent, right? So weirdly enough, it was to a bank manager here in the UK, because she came to the UK at some point with my younger brother, and she opened a Lloyd's bank account. And she was having some issues accessing the bank account, and it looks like they were just like, pushing her to pillar to post and stuff. And she was just so angry. So she wrote this letter that she never sent. But again, it was just her way of
Getting it out.
Getting it out. She didn't even know it was journaling. Anyway, so long and short of the story, while packing up her stuff, I found this note, as always, where she just writes her dreams and her aspirations. And one of the things on there was send Tosse, which is the name they called me back home, send Tosse abroad for her master's. Big aspiration for someone who...
her goal to send you.
Yeah, that was a big thing. So it was a big thing to study abroad in Nigeria. So as much as it wasn't a goal of mine at the time, that planted that seed.
Right. Yeah.
Weirdly enough, I was like, you
That
know what?
started you dreaming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was like, wow, okay, this, why not? Why not? And then the dreams started, and I started imagining myself, in a different country. Weirdly enough, when I met my husband, he wasn't thinking about it. We were fine financially. We were doing great at the time in Nigeria, but then planted the seed in his heart, and it was like, why not? We're young once. Let's try it and see how we get on. So, we both resigned from our jobs with a 13-month-old child at the time. We moved and
Just
had
like
to start from scratch,
just
literally,
like that. You just up and
just
left.
like just like that. It's like I said, you only live once, right? And it was something we wanted to do. We both were in agreement with. Spoke to our church. Everyone, we got the blessing of people who cared about us, and yeah, we left.
What challenges did you face doing that? Were there challenges? I can imagine
Ooh.
there were quite a few
Oh my
challenges.
goodness, yeah. Like I said, we started from scratch. Like my husband was like 2 steps away from being a manager, and this was for banks in Nigeria. And banks in Nigeria, I'm like, here, unless you're talking about the investment banking, banks in Nigeria were the beginning and end all. So they were where the real money makers were. So we had some money in savings, but we literally came from that. We took our savings, came here with no jobs, nothing to come to.
So to leave a position that you're almost going to become a manager, to do that's a massive step, a massive
Yeah.
not challenge, risk, I guess.
Yeah, it's not it's ruined us for any more risks any of that magnitude from that point on.
Yeah, everything
uh,
seems really small now compared to that.
yeah, it does in many ways, but it was, I mean, 13-month-old, we moved in with our friends, slept on in their living room for 6 weeks.
So they were
um
friends from Nigeria that had already made the move.
yes,
Okay.
yes, they lived in a 2-bedroom flat. It was packed with husband, wife, child, sister, mother at some point. So with us three, I mean, I think back at that time, and I have nothing but love for that family, because it took a lot, to take us in, young family, a child who had to acclimatize. So he went through the ringer. So he was 13-month-old. He had just learned how to walk. To be, you don't know how kids, well, I'm sure you do, obviously, but when kids are pulled out from what is familiar, even when they don't have the words to explain it, they feel it in their body. I didn't realize that until I saw it in my son. So he just went, it was a horrendous experience, but we moved, we're fine. Hustled like we're used to doing, got our first jobs in the first few weeks that we were there. Got our first flat, and just, yeah, moved on from there. And so many, many, many challenges, but as you get, because we had to find work. We had to start from call centers.
Right. So how long did you work in a call center?
I worked in a call center so we moved in 2008, so for 4 years, four, 5 years.
4 years. Wow, that's a long time. And
Yeah.
did you just stay there to get some stability, or while you were there, were you looking at other things?
I was looking at other things. I kind of knew from even back then that the 9 to 5 life wasn't for me.
Mm.
You know how, again, you learn things about yourself as you get older. But I knew the 9 to 5 life wasn't for me. But I didn't have a choice, right?
Wow.
So, yeah, was in the call center. Moved around in the call centers a little bit, because I was, got one in an insurance company and another one in a car rental company and another. So the different, just moved around in different ways. But in the meantime, I was trying to find ways to make money online. So my first inroad into the online world was 2010. So it was during the maternity of my daughter. So she came around in 2010. At this time, so I had a newborn, I had a 3-year-old. And that for me was the golden opportunity to try and find a way to make life, outside. At the time, I thought it was just going to be singing. And I found, internet marketing, as it was mostly called at the time.
Yeah, like network marketing.
Sorry?
Network marketing.
Not network marketing. No, I actually did not network marketing. I didn't even know there was a thing called network marketing at the time. It was internet marketing. So you had the affiliate marketing, people who were doing the affiliate marketing. So those guys that will set up this websites and they will blog on the websites and then they would sell things off the back of it. I know now it's called internet affiliate marketing.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So that was that. So I started a blog. Paid for my first, I did my first, you want to say invest in yourself. So I paid for my first course, put it on the credit card, which is the worst mistake I should have ever, I mean, don't try this at home, people. I mean, if you're good at your finances, by all means. I was new to using credit cards because we didn't use credit cards in Nigeria. So in my mind, it was free money that I can use. And obviously I wasn't using the money for like, to me, it wasn't like for frivolous stuff. I was using it to invest in myself.
Right, so you weren't aware of how to pay it off without getting the interest.
Yes. So I knew I had to pay it off, but I didn't realize that it was going to be it was a huge interest. And before long, I was struggling to pay. Right. So that took us down another like financial hellhole. So we learned a lot. People don't realize how much is involved when you emigrate to a new country. Because
you didn't have your parents to ask either.
No, there's no one to ask.
Well, they weren't not just that they weren't in the country with you; they weren't around at all. I mean, because my son has just got his first credit card, and we had a lesson on how, because he needs to build his credit rating.
Yes.
So we had a home lesson on how to use it to make sure, you use it at the end of every month, but you pay off as soon as you get. And if you don't have that, I mean, he's got friends that, like you, owe money on their credit cards because they haven't had that guidance. So you don't know, do you?
There's a lot we had to learn from trial and error, from experience. I tell my children now that experience is a great teacher, but other people's experience, an even better teacher.
Yeah.
So learn from our experiences. So that was one of probably our biggest lessons. So we could just go into this financial hole. I see a lot of Nigerians coming into the UK or any other like developed country, and I see them struggle with the same thing because it's not something we're used to. So even when you are of the mind that I will pay back, because the way it works in Nigeria is that you just borrow from people, right? Yeah. If you need money, you borrow from people. So good meaning people will give you the money. And sometimes you might struggle to pay back, but it's your friend or it's your family member. So you can always strike an agreement.
Yeah. And they're not going to charge you interest, are
they?
They're
not going to charge you interest. Exactly. In this case, this is the bank, right? So that was a big lesson to learn, even though I was investing in myself. Didn't see returns because, again, it was a new territory. Hadn't done internet marketing before. But that experience made me see that I had a gift in writing. I didn't know that. Okay. So we look at all these different
doors open, don't they? I mean, Absolutely. It might not be the door for you there, but it opens a door over there, and that's where we go next time.
Absolutely. So that was my situation. I figured out I could write. So I started blogging, stopped after a while because I had to go back to full-time work to pay my debt. Because my husband, though he was working full-time, couldn't fend for us as a family with just his salary. So I had to go back to work. But one thing led to the other. I from trialing out internet marketing, I found the courage to trial out singer-songwriting as a profession, which was a very interesting journey in itself. But from that, I went back into writing and found copywriting, and learned how to make money from the internet, pretty much. So started out. So I actually got on Fiverr. People think when they think of Fiverr, they think of graphic designing or they think of social media marketing. I got on Fiverr as a singer. So I would, my husband and I, since he plays keys and he could muck about on what we call, the name escapes me now. So where you put in the music and you adjust and you do all the different things. So we call it DAW. So he found he could do a little bit of that. So we would set up all the mics and everything. And we were just singing for producers who didn't have vocals, who needed vocals.
Right.
Yeah, and I started making money that way. Burnt out a little bit though from everything because it was a lot. It
This
was
is
a lot.
still had a full-time job.
I still had a
You had to do
full-time job.
courses and doing that. Yeah. Juggling the plates.
Yeah, juggling all the plates, including parenting. And yeah, after a while, but again, it's this thing where I can't stay down. This die empty thing in my mind. When I think back, where did that come from? It had to come from my mom, because thinking about it, the more I think about it, because obviously the older I'm now, past the age she was when she died,
Right.
there were many, many, many breadcrumbs she left, so my love for singing came from her, because my childhood was all plastered with all the cassette tapes, the music cassette tapes she had, my introduction. She was my introduction to the Brian McKnights of the day, and the Phil Collins of the day, and the Elton Johns of the day, and all those guys, the guys of Lionel Richie, Madonna. Those were like the soundtrack to my childhood.
Yeah, me too. 80s.
Yes. And then even my love for writing, watching her journal her way around the house, gave me that, like, you can express yourself like this.
Yeah.
So
you've learned that subconsciously without even knowing that she's teaching you that. It's come into your DNA.
Absolutely. And then she was just this free spirit, because remember, she got married at 18. I didn't share this earlier. She got married at 18 and had me at 20. So, and then 7 children at 36.
Wow.
But inside of all that, she still found time to become a golfer. She was an amateur golfer and enjoyed it. She still found that she was the cool auntie, right? She knew all the dance steps. She kept up with the times. She was a free spirit. A very difficult thing to be when you're married to a man who's 21 years older than you. Right?
Oh, so your dad was a lot older.
Yeah. Different generation entirely. So that was why it was such a dysfunctional home, because it was just difficult, right? To gel. They were just on 2 different planes entirely. But that was
when they get, sorry to jump back again.
Yeah, no, please. We're chatting, aren't we?
How did they get together then? What was the story there? Was that a
good question? Or... So another insight into the Nigerian society, at least back then. It wasn't as such an arranged marriage in the sense of arranged marriages, but it was that sort of thing where he'd been a man about the town. He was, had a few, little money, cash here and there. He was growing his career, and he wasn't married. He was 39 and not married, or in his 30s and not married. And it was that thing where it was like, okay, we need to find this man a wife, and it has to be, a young, fine girl, and that's the way it kind of worked. So. Someone...
keep talking. There's somebody at my door.
That's all right. That's okay. So, what was I? So it was the situation of, someone who knows someone who knows someone, and the person introduces you to this young, fresh-looking girl, and my mom. At least, I mean, she was my mom, so I guess I'm a little biased. I think that she was really, really beautiful woman. Okay, so I'm going to go back and say what I was just saying. So welcome back. So I was saying that it was a case of, one person who knows someone who knows someone. And I think my mom's oldest brother was his junior in secondary school. So my mom came from a polygamous home, and her dad had like 8 wives. At the time of his death, it was 8 wives and 27 children.
Wow.
And 51 grandchildren.
Wow.
I know. So her oldest brother was from the first wife. So he's like light years away from her age, right?
Yeah.
And he was still a junior. Even then, he was still a junior to my dad in secondary school. So, but they kept in touch. And it was this thing, I've got a little sister, that kind of thing, So, a couple of people like, we know this girl. I think you're really gonna like her. I mean, she's young, she's fresh, she's. And my mom, I was just telling your audience that I may be biased, but my mom was drop dead gorgeous, right? So men, I mean, were like throwing themselves.
Beautiful, you know, what more could he want?
So that's how they kind of met. And my mom, I guess at the time, was also looking at this man who, even though he probably would not have been her ideal, he was comfortable.
He could provide for her and give her a good life.
He was comfortable and can provide for her and provide for her children, her unborn children. And coming from a polygamous home like that, that was a plus. The fact that you could move from that environment of competition and all that is happening and move into your own space, and you're moving with someone who is already comfortable. He already has a house. He already has maids. He already has, help, in terms of domestic help and stuff like that. It was a win-win in her case at the time, but things went downhill really quickly from that point on.
Yes. I can't imagine what went through her mind. So at first I would imagine that she was like, oh, this is great. This isn't, like you said, a win-win for me going straight into this. But then when being faced with a relationship that, you're not really into, I know she must have felt trapped, I guess.
I don't doubt that she felt trapped in many ways. She tried to make it work. Don't get me wrong. She did try, for at least for our sakes. But she was a free spirit and she was creative and didn't really get an outlet for those things because she was in this marriage. Initially, she was also, being that my dad was a ranking officer, it meant she had to be. So imagine what a governor and a governor's wife, or POTUS, so in America, so the American president and his wife. So there's a certain reputation and a certain aura you have to carry and a certain carriage, and she was a young girl trapped behind that. She was like barely out of her 20s, and she already had like 5, and then last born was born at 36. So so
my firstborn was born at 36. Can't imagine having 7 kids already.
I know. So there was a lot that was trapped in there. I know that because it came out in different ways. Whilst we had I talk about her now with so much fondness, but we had a very turbulent relationship. We did, because we're butting heads a lot because she wanted to go live her life. She would go on this like 5-day golf tournaments, and I'm like, who are you leaving the children with? Sorry?
Were you in charge of the kids then when she
Yes, that's why that was the problem.
Right. Yeah.
That was the problem, because I was like, who is going to...
And how old were you when this was happening?
16, 15.
Yeah, that's the last thing you wanted to do, isn't it? Look how
very last thing. I mean, I was young. I also was a free spirit. So I wanted to do my own things. Obviously, I didn't know that was what it was then, but that was why we were butting heads, because she was loving in her own way and very like this go-getter. She was strength personified. I never saw her ill, and she was like go 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 go. But I was the same.
Yeah, I guess if you put yourself in her shoes, she's thinking, okay, I've got a daughter now who's old enough that I can leave and now I can go and live a little, because I've just spent the last 15 years bringing kids up.
Yeah.
And obviously selfishly not thinking about how you are feeling.
Absolutely.
Yes, I can see why that would be.
It was tough. She tried the best that she could with what she knew, but it was a lot to have 7 children with different. I mean, the times I speak with my younger siblings, we had different parents. You know what I mean? We had different parents in the sense that the mom she was to them is a very different mom that was she was to me, because at the time she had me, she was barely out of her teens herself.
Yeah.
Right. And so we were more friends than mom and daughter. And she was more mom to them. So I tell them, we had completely different parents. So if you speak to them, even though they were so young, we have very different
memories of her.
Memories and recollections and, narratives when it comes to our parents. But she was pretty much what I have pretty much become, not in the sense that, I mean, I have more sense now.
Kids and leave your eldest.
I was a little older when I got married, thankfully, and a little wiser, because again, I learned a lot growing up from their mistakes. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be repeating those mistakes. So in terms of how I chose to bring up my children, it was again from them. I'm like, okay, so what would I have done differently? Because I was also this really highly sensitive child. So I would go and climb a tree somewhere and just really just so when I hear people talk about self-reflection, I was like, dude, we've been doing that from where from where we were like, little, really little, because I would go and I would make up this whole universe of what it would look like if my mom was this way and my dad was this way. So by the time I had my own children, I had a plan. Obviously, as you know, things don't because you're bringing up human beings, aren't you? So it's not like things always work according to your plan. But I'm just saying,
it's really interesting how you can see now that you were self-reflecting and manifesting and doing all those things without knowing you were doing them.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100. It was my coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Because again, very soft, easily hurt child. I would go into little crannies in my home to go hide.
Well, I'm not surprised. You had all those other siblings around. You need to find somewhere to like get your head around everything.
Yeah, that was so. I was so good at climbing trees when I was a little girl because that could be my hiding spot. And we had all these beautiful trees, guava trees and stuff in our home, back then. Or I would find, this little. Okay, so back then we had this inbuilt wardrobes that always had space for luggage on the top, and I would go and hide in. Oh my goodness! I would go and hide in there. It was a lot of fun, but it was also from that place. So because having those hidden places, it was my little, space.
It was your space. It was your escape.
My escape, yeah. Both physically and mentally.
Do you go back now to visit, or when's the last time?
Good question. I didn't go back for 60. I actually didn't go back at all until last year. So it was my husband's, father's 80th birthday. So it was an opportunity to take the family because the kids had never been. I mean, my oldest was born there, but he obviously didn't know anything about the place. So it was good to go back and show them what life was like for us, back then.
How old are your kids now?
They're 18, almost 15, and almost 11.
And what do they think about how you grew up? Was that
God,
mind-blowing?
They still can't reconcile, which is why it was so good to go back home, because they just could not reconcile their lives here and what life was like for us. My husband has a completely different story entirely, right? Sorry, it's something I can see something in my eye. Yeah, something completely different. His experience was completely different from mine. So just going back and showing them my dad's home, obviously meeting their grandparents, because my husband's parents are still alive, thank God. So at least they have one set of grandparents that they
was that the first time you met them?
That was the second time of meeting them, because my parents-in-law came to visit back some years ago. Okay. So that was their first time of meeting them, and it was just so good. It's so beautiful to have family around you, not just your immediate family, and that's something I didn't grow up having, unfortunately. So,
and all their aunties and uncles, they've met all them now.
They have met all but one, or all but two, because sadly I lost my youngest brother a few years ago. But so the one just before him, who is she's in America, so they've not met her. But they've met all of them, because it's been one after the other. It's taken a while. It's taken a while, but they've met all of them now.
Are there lots of cousins everywhere?
Lots of cousins. Well, it's right. Well, not that many. Well, the family is massive. You're going to add so my second cousins and my third cousins, then you're going into the huge rabbit hole, right? But the cousins from my siblings, they've met Actually, they've met all of them now. Yeah, they've met all of them now. So I've got three, and I think there are like six more that they've met now. And
So are
then
they all in Nigeria, apart from your sister who's in the States? Are they all still in Nigeria?
no, I just have two left in Nigeria now. So I've got two here now, and then
Oh,
one in the States, and then one passed away, and then just two left in Nigeria now.
and they've been in Nigeria the whole time.
They have. They
And
have.
they never been interested in escaping. They're happy with
Yeah,
escaping.
I think
Like,
you'd be hard pressed to meet a Nigerian who grew up in the South, especially because we are quite influenced by the Western world,
okay.
primarily American, even though we were fashioned after the British system because we were colonized by the British, right? But as the years have gone by, the culture has imbibed a lot of the American culture. So I'm yet to meet anyone in Nigeria who, even if they don't want to go and live in the West, they at least want to visit at the very least.
Yeah.
That said, a lot has changed in the last, me growing up, it was all American music. And, I reeled out some names to you earlier. So British and American, that was what I grew up listening to. But in this day and age, with the rise of Afro beats, I don't know if you heard anything about, so with the rise of Afro beats, especially with the younger generation, it's opened up a new culture to our children. So they are now, when you have the likes of Ed Sheeran, collaborating with a Nigerian artist, and so many of them, and so you hear a white ginger boy playing Afrobeats. It doesn't get any better than that. So the world has really opened up to Afrobeats, and for that reason, there's a lot coming out from Nigeria now. So I feel that Nigerians are probably one of the most creative, most hardworking people you will ever find.
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm not saying it because I'm Nigerian, but you see the stats, what they're doing in America, what they're doing in different parts of the world. We get a lot of slack because we're also, our creativity sometimes takes us down the wrong route of scamming people.
Yeah, I was going to say that Nigerians get blamed for a lot of the scams that go on.
Yeah, unfortunately. But, on the flip side of that is a lot of creativity from the arts. So you have the likes of the Chimamanda Adichie's, who's an incredible literary giant. I was listening to a podcast with her on, Trevor Noah.
I've heard the name.
Trevor Noah. He's a comedian. He's a stand-up comedian, but he also did the Daily Show.
Oh yes. I know you mean.
So she was on that show, and I just love how very Nigerian she is, even though she is now predominantly living in America, but she is still very much Nigerian. She still speaks her dialect. I don't speak mine, but she speaks hers, and she just made me really proud to be Nigerian. And she's this, she's the Beyonce. I think she's the Beyonce of literary fiction in this day and age. She's really that good. So you have a lot of them who are now doing that. So the music, the Burna Boys and the Limo Blazes, and there's so many of them coming up now. So
have you faced much prejudice in the UK?
This is a very good question. Joe, I'm loving your questions.
They're just coming.
I'd say thankfully no.
That's good.
But the reason I pause is because I wonder if it's because of my natural outlook to life, not necessarily because it's not there.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes when you come across unbiased prejudice, you can take it in different ways, can't you?
Yeah.
And if you've got a personality like your own and an outlook like your own, you can maybe see beyond that, whereas some people can't.
Yeah.
It's not a good or a bad thing, but if it helps you get through challenges, then I guess that's a good thing, isn't it?
And you know what? I come from a country. So, when, if you don't mind me going back to the pandemic and the George Floyd issue, right? When it blew up, funny enough, I was having a conversation with a friend during the weekend about this. So I had friends, especially in my music world, who were, white, and they would, they really felt this need. These were American friends. They felt this need to, like, ask me questions and really wanted to make sure they were doing right by me. And and I loved them for it. But I told them, I was like, well, it's not really new. Why? And I heard Trevor Noah talk about this because he's South African. So he grew up he was a boy during the apartheid, the apartheid of South Africa. I was like, well, I grew up with a lot of tribalism. So in Nigeria, sadly, and it's probably one of the reasons we are still where we are, because a rich country like that, not just in natural resources, but human resources, should be way ahead from where we are at the moment. But there's a lot, one of the things, and I'm not even going to try and assess the entire Nigerian society, right?
Yeah.
But one of the challenges I see is tribalism. So you've got people from different, so you have three major tribes, but aside the three major tribes, there are hundreds of little tribes. We have at least 200 to 300 languages spoken in that country.
Really?
Believe it or not. Yeah. So you have three major tribes, but they are not, you still have, so I come from what is known as one of the minor tribes. So you hear people say an ethnic minority. I was like, I was already a minority in the country that I came from anyway. So it's not new to me, is what I'm trying to say. It's not new to be in rooms where you're not recognized because you don't come from one of the three tribes.
Right. And I think that white people will find that hard to comprehend, I think, because we don't have that in our culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to think that, well, why would you feel that already around your own people?
Yeah. No, it was, it was normal to, well, I say normal, but it wasn't, it was commonplace to apply for a job. And it will be given to this person who's from this tribe because the hiring manager comes from that same tribe.
Right. So it's prejudice, same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So I was like, it doesn't, normal. You learn to rise above it, right? So, I mean, thankfully, I still think no one has necessarily done that to my face. But the way I see it, and that's how I teach my children, and my son was asking me a question today. He said, and I guess this is the part that gets really, I guess it can go either way. So he was telling me that a friend of his from work was asking him if every Black boy braids their hair. And I was like, that's quite ignorant, right?
Yeah.
So, but what I told him, I was like, well, if I were in that position, I'll see it as an opportunity to educate. So I shouldn't have to, but I will lead with curiosity here and assume that you're just not exposed enough. So it would be my responsibility to educate you rightly. So I'll give you an example. When my daughter took ballet classes when she was younger. Now, in the ballet world, you've got women girls with sleek hair put to the back in a straight bun. Exactly. And her dance school would send off this thing with like, we need the hair nicely sleeked back and with brown eye shadow. And I'm like, hold up. My daughter's hair is curly. It's not going to be straight down, sleek. So you're just going to accept it the way I'm going to do it. That's the first thing. Secondly, she can't use brown because she's brown. So I'm going
to see it.
I'm going to use blue so it can stand out, because the reason you want to use brown is because you want it to stand out, right? So we are going to use blue. Is that okay? And I'm like, oh, you know what? We didn't even think about that. I was like, well, yeah, that's the problem. You didn't think.
Yeah. Didn't think. And it's good to have people like you that will say, well, no, that's not going to work for us.
Yeah.
And open up the conversation.
Yes, exactly. Open up the
conversation. Communication like that,
yeah,
then the prejudice can then be put out the window.
Absolutely. Because I genuinely do not think people, I mean, I know there are people who do it intentionally, but I genuinely believe that people,
I think that's the minority. I believe
yeah, I think most people mean well, but you just
they're like, oh crikey, yeah, I just didn't think.
Yeah, they just don't think. So I told my son, I was like, it's our opportunity to educate, to let them know, okay, this is how it works for us. And every time it's happened, they've always put their hands up. It's like, you know what? It didn't even occur to us. Now it does, because it's one black girl amongst a sea of white girls. So
Yeah.
it didn't even occur to us that your
And then when the next black girl comes along,
exactly,
issue they won't even be
exactly,
discussed because they've learnt from you.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
brilliant.
I think we need, because I know there are lots of people that believe, and I know I'm probably going to get enough slack for it, for people who believe that no, I shouldn't have to educate you. I was like, how are they going to learn?
Don't know, you don't know.
That's the way I
Yeah.
see it. So, and
Oh, that's
plus,
good.
it just makes it easier to get along, because we're going to have to get along one way or the other, right?
Yeah, yeah. And if you get defensive and offended by every single thing that
Every single
people
thing, yeah.
say, and makes your life more difficult as well
Absolutely.
as everyone else's. So yeah, I love your outlook on life. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah, it's lovely. It was lovely chatting to you today and getting to know you a bit better.
Oh, thank you,
Really
Joe.
enjoyed our chat, and I'm sure you're going to educate people watching this, just to, ladies and men who had no idea about the Nigerian culture as well and the way things are. So we've had a little insight into that. I could talk to you all day, but
Me too, Joe. This was fun. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My eyes seem to be watering a lot, but I promise you, it's not because I'm crying,
tell
guys.
from here. Well, I can't tell from here anyway.
It's not because I'm crying.
I
I am a very passionate person, so it might sound like I'm shouting, but guys, it's just me.
No,
Thank
you
you,
don't.
Joe.
You come across really energetic. Your energy, your vibe is just amazing. So I'm
Thank you.
sure the people watching this will feel it as well. So thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for giving me your
No,
time
thank you,
today.
Joe. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you for, I mean, this was just great. I love what you're doing here. Keep going. Keep
Thank
going.
you. I will. Thank you so much. And enjoy the rest of the day.
You too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.